The James Show Podcast.
No fat generals is the one-line summary of Pete Hegseth's meeting of the generals today. And what a bizarre situation we're in. Not the meeting itself. Because to me, there doesn't seem to be anything more normal in the world than the guy who's running the Department of War to want to have a meeting with generals. So I've just been getting just tickled all week by the people that are saying, boy, this is weird. This is just strange. This is unprecedented. This meeting is unprecedented. Really? Secretary of War wanted to meet with his generals? That's unprecedented? That's weird? Is there anything more normal in the world? Well, it's like, oh, that's so weird. The Secretary of Agriculture visited a farm. Yeah, that's kind of what I expected he does every damn day. What else does the guy do? Fire missiles? So, all right, I'm going to play Pete Hegseth first because I want you to see how little weird applies to what just happened today. Because not only was the specter of, oh my God, can you believe the Department of Defense is flying in all these generals for a meeting? Yeah, I figured that's what they were going to do on a regular Tuesday. So here's what was so strange and unprecedented and weird. Pete Hegseth is just calling for the return of equal standards and high standards to the military. That doesn't really strike me as weird at all.
I don't want my son serving alongside troops who are out of shape, or in combat unit with females who can't meet the same combat arms physical standards as men, or troops who are not fully proficient on their assigned weapons, platform, or task, or under a leader who was the first but not the best. Standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high. If not, they're not standards. They're just suggestions. Suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed.
Oh, no, we should have equal standards and they should be high in the military. Whoop-de-doo. That's controversial. That's wild. That's unprecedented. That's weird. Hang on. And the other big clip here is you're probably going to hear this part on a bunch of other shows. Because it is kind of funny. Pete Hegseth doesn't want any more fat generals. I thought that was already a rule. We have fat generals? Are we allowed to?
I'm also directing that warfighters in combat jobs execute their service fitness test at a gender-neutral, age-normed male standard scored above 70%. It all starts with physical fitness and appearance. If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force.
So he's talking about himself.
Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test.
Yeah, that doesn't sound so crazy. It sounds, I don't know, like a return to meritocracy. Now, if you want to know what I'm talking about, I'll play you a couple examples here. Here's how it was treated in the media. You know, I started seeing this a little bit at the end of the weekend. They really hit it hard Saturday and Sunday, and yesterday was kind of off the chain, too. This is the PBS affiliate in D.C. Boy, we can't defund that fast enough, can we? Listen to how they talk about this meeting of the generals.
You know, when generals are called back to Washington in this way and they don't know the reason, it's usually to be fired. And so just the approach of it sort of creates a little angst within the rank and file. And on top of that, to have them put in this room where you have hundreds of people from all over the world pulled off of key battles and front lines, to be in the same room, it poses a huge security risk.
All right, two things. Number one, huge security risk, so we're not supposed to have meetings with generals. I think we've got it covered. I don't think anyone's going to fly in and bomb them at Quantico. That's where they met today, Quantico. Look, the other part of this, hang on, just so you hear it again.
People from all over the world pulled off of key battles and front lines.
The front lines of what? We're not in a war. Well, we're not, air quotes, in a war. We're not technically in a war. We're not in a declared war. Front lines of what? Ukraine and Russia? What are we doing on the front lines? We're not. Oh, see, they're just making this stuff up. Oh, it's a big security risk. And so now the meeting's already happened. Was there an attack? Was there a bomb? Did anybody get hurt? Did anybody take advantage of the situation to knock out a bunch of American generals? Did anybody even stub their toe on a coffee table? So no. The meeting's only been over for about 4 hours, 5 hours, and we already know that was bogus criticism. Here's another one. These people, all of a sudden, they just become fiscal conservatives at the weirdest points. We're in a government shutdown debate, or we're planning on either passing a true $2 trillion deficit budget or one that's even worse than that. But jeepers, I don't know if we can afford bringing in all these generals.
Washington Post is reporting that the event will cost millions of dollars, that it raises military security concerns, and that it runs the risk of leaving top military leaders stranded. Quote, it is estimated that flying, lodging, and transporting all the military leaders, some of whom will be traveling from the Mideast, Europe, and the Indo-Pacific, will cost millions. The event has also raised security concerns about having all the top leadership in one place, particularly given that Tuesday is the end of the fiscal year, and if the government shuts down, it could leave key personnel stranded.
Isn't that just glorious coming from the party that is okay with spending millions on a global warming coloring book in Rwanda? Oh, but having the generals come to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Secretary of War, or whatever we're calling Pete Hegseth now. Like, jeepers, I don't know if we can afford that. I mean, we have a big deficit going. I might have to check with my accountant. I don't know if these checks will clear. And this other part, just listen, not even to the content of it as much as listen to how much Nicole on MSNBC is just dripping with contempt about this story, about having to talk about the generals meeting with the Secretary of War. The most normal thing in the world. What does she call it? Weird.
Meeting of military leaders who have been summoned from command posts all around the world by Pete Hegseth to hear his 1 hour long take on, quote, warrior ethos is, if you can believe it, sounding even more weird by the hour. Yesterday, Donald Trump told NBC News that he will now be attending the meeting. Trump said this, quote, it's really just a very nice meeting, talking about how well we're doing militarily, talking about being in great shape, talking about a lot of good positive things. It's just a good message. We have some great people coming in, and it's just an esprit de corps. You know the expression esprit de corps? That's all it's about. We're talking about what we're doing, what they're doing, and how we're doing. Exactly what one would want the person with the nuclear launch codes to say about the reason he summoned every military leader to a single meeting in one room.
Well, she's really not enjoying her job, is she? And the look on her face is like this weekend when Miss Parker made fish for dinner. It was like cod or halibut, or I don't know my fish that well. But our 10-year-old girl didn't want to eat any, and she was like, yeah, I don't want to eat it. And this is what Nicole's face looked like on MSNBC. We're having a meeting with the generals. God, this is so weird. Ugh, esprit de corps. Is that what we want the nuclear code guy? Stop it. You're childish. You don't have to hate everything the man does. You don't have to act like a child having a hissy fit to make your point. You hate the guy. We got it. Coming up next, by the way, security concerns. The criticisms over the cost. Really? But we're going to ask someone who knows a lot more about this than I do. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. You've seen him on Fox News 100 times. He probably has a little more valid opinion on what Pete Hegseth announced in today's meeting with the generals. So with that, welcome back, Tony. Good to have you back on the show. Look, I'll admit my naivete. I thought we already had physical standards for soldiers all the way up to generals. What am I missing here?
Well, James, great to be with you again. And the standards had slipped over the past 20 years. Yeah, you're right. There is a requirement in each service that every year you take a physical physical training test. Each service calls it something different, and it varies. The Marine Corps does a 3-mile run plus some other stuff. The Coast Guard, Navy, and Air Force do a 1.5-mile run, and the Army does a 2-mile run plus other things. And the problem's been enforcement. And yeah, I know what Pete, and full disclosure, Pete and I are friends, so just take my words with that in context. If you go to the Pentagon, you will wander the halls and see people who are, not meeting the standards. And we used to have a joke in the Army that some of the senior officers would take the written PT test, which means basically they would pencil in their results without doing the test. So what he's doing, and he's saying, and I know this to be true based on some of his actions over the last six months, they're basically saying, look, this is a standard that all personnel in uniform will have to meet. And that includes the generals. And my dear friend, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Dunford, would get up every day and he would go out and run his ass off. And, he was, in his late 50s, early 60s. And so if Joe can do it, and by the way, I still, I'm coming up on 63. I still knock out 20 pull-ups a day. So there's really no reason to not meet the standard. It's something that I think is easily done if you put your mind right. And that's what Pete is saying.
Wow. You do 20 pull-ups a day?
I do.
You get a light round of applause for that, Tony. Okay. So what if, here's a scenario that might sound naive, but remember, most of us weren't in the military.
Right.
What if we had like a really good general who just had a bum foot and he couldn't do it? Like, what if Douglas MacArthur in World War II or the Korean War or whatever, couldn't meet his PT? Would that really be what's best for the military, to expel a good general?
Well, I always provide people options. There's something called the Senior Executive Service, and I've known a number of officers who retire at the 05 or 06 level, the lieutenant colonel or commander or captain or colonel level. They get out, they become senior executives. One of my dear friends, Tony Tata, Brigadier General Tony Tata, is now the Undersecretary of Defense for personnel. He's still serving. I love Tony. I hope Tony doesn't get upset about this, but I don't think Tony's taken a PT test anytime in the recent past, and nor should he. So there's ways, James, of people continuing to serve. It's just maybe being in uniform is not the best one.
Well, I think he's going to catch a lot of flack for this. By the way, we're talking with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer because he's trying to make him equal. Now, you would think that the critics would be all on board with that, but this isn't the air quotes equality that they're looking for.
No. And one of the things he said, which is going to rile a lot of people on the left, is that combat standards are uniform. That is to say, if you're a man or a woman and you're in a position, we call them military occupation specialists in the Army. If you're in a combat billet, you will be trained to a single standard. And look, James, I've known females. I've worked with a number of females in special units. By the way, we had females serving in special mission units long before we admitted it, because there was need for women to do things at certain times. And the standard is the same. It should be the same. The enemy won't recognize a female for not being able to perform in combat commensurate with her male counterpart. And there was a study, again, done by my friend Joe Dunford, General Dunford, when he became chairman of the when he was commandant of the Marine Corps. He did a study where he actually allowed for women to serve in Marine Corps combat units, and they always ended up serving at the same standard as the Marines, at the bottom 2% of the unit, because there's just physical requirements they can't meet. So the idea that we will allow women or other men, some men who can't perform to that standard, to serve in these these STRAC units, these super cool and very important units, just because they want to, well, that's not the right answer. And the idea of because you sleep with a certain sex, or you have a certain skin color, and you're presumed to have the ability to serve in these things and don't meet the standard, well, that day is over.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like it would fit too well in a military setting where your life is on the line. I'd like, because these are all, and we say this as hyperbole a lot, but we don't mean it here. This really is a matter of life and death. Now, under these standards, these combat standards, is it absolutely impossible for any woman to pass these? Has any woman ever passed the new high standards that we've had?
Oh, yeah. As I mentioned, I don't want to get into too many names, but I'll just call her Melanie, because she was Melanie. Was someone I knew personally who would literally, she lived in like Old Town Alexandria. If you've been to the area here,
I know that place.
It's about a 9 mile ride. 9 miles to the Pentagon from Old Town Alexandria. She used to ride her bike in every day. She could meet every standard any male could, and more. So yes, the answer is absolutely. And there are women now who are in the military who can meet those standards, but not all military, like not all men, can meet those standards. So I think the idea here is if you're going into one of those positions which require a certain level of physical capability, it's like I was reading a thing about a Navy SEAL rescuing a female teacher in the Middle East. Well, he had to literally pick her up and put her over his shoulder to carry her out of her captors. Not all people can do that, and that's why it's important to have a certain standard for those who serve in those units.
Colonel Schaefer, is there anything Pete Hegseth announced today that you don't like?
Honestly, no. I listened to the whole speech, and it's the View, which is always a font of really good information.
That's a good one.
They called it retro standards. Like, no, it's not really retro.
Well, it's a return to higher standards. You can call it retro if you want. That doesn't make it bad. All right, thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer on the James Show. Appreciate it, sir. I'm cracking up on this, but I do have some sort of positive the information that I'm gleaning from the criticism of this. You know, the meeting happened earlier today, so it's now like 4 or 5 hours old. And I was listening to a little bit of MSNBC on the break there because they talked about it right as I was going to commercials. Like, heck, let's see what they're saying. They're still complaining about the security risk, which the meeting's already over. So what are you talking about? And they're worried about the cost. They actually didn't have criticism for the changes themselves, the raising of standards, the equalizing out of standards. Now, I don't know if I've just heard, a few minutes there that didn't contain that part. But if they're not actually complaining against the changes themselves, I see that as a positive. But what do you think? Should we allow fat generals? What if the greatest general in the world just happens to be 300 pounds? Paul in Dallas, you're on WBAP.
We should absolutely not allow fat generals. I retired from the military over 20 years. And this was 17 years ago, and I saw the change about 20 years ago. I didn't realize they had changed the PT qualifications as much. So it's kind of amazing to me. But there's one thing that people don't realize about all of this. There's nothing more inspiring to troops is to see the commanders get their asses chewed out. and it's an inspiring moment to see that they must hold the same standards as the troops on the field. So yeah, absolutely. They were brought together, and that's what they got. They got their asses chewed, and they're either going to change or they're out.
Well, Paul, fill the rest of us in. Listen, most of us weren't in the military. You say the PT, the physical training standards have changed. What did they used to be, and how have they changed?
Well, it used to be push-ups, sit-ups, and the run. I mean, I really don't know the changes because I've been out for so many years, but I know they change what they have to do, but I don't know about the standards. I'm sure they've fallen a little bit. I know that when I was in, I had participated as a drill instructor, and some of the changes there were you had to go softer on the troops, the trainees. You had to, for example, we had a sergeant major who got us together, and he said that we could only do what we would call remedial training to get the soldiers' attention, make them do push-ups and stuff like that. He said we could only do 25 push-ups. And so I asked him, what do you mean? Is that 25 at a time? He says, no, 25 a day. So after they had done the PT in the morning, we couldn't use the physical training to get their attention, to get them to, smarten up. And that's what we would use. We use the physical training to motivate them. And so we were instructed that we could only do 25 push-ups in a day because for some reason there were certain soldiers that were getting stressed out and complaining, and
all right,
it just
Paul,
got to a.
I really appreciate you filling out this topic because this is a hole of ignorance that most of us have because most of us weren't in the military. But I want y'all to keep an open mind because in the future of drone warfare, the greatest warrior is not going to be the guy that goes storming the walls of Paris looking like John Cena in jean shorts. It's going to be some fat, dumpy guy that's in a trailer with a remote control flying a drone somewhere in the Nevada desert. And he's not going to look like Rambo Part 2. He's going to look like an ad for Golden Corral, but he will be the greatest warrior in the world. And I know he's not going to be on the front lines of combat, but let's just keep an open mind about, not shutting off all of the military to people who just, have a few extra calories. How about that? Thank you, Paul.
I disagree.
Okay. No, you disagree. All right. That's cool. Let's do Ken in Arlington. You're on WBAP. What do you think about fat generals, Ken?
Kevin.
No, Ken. Go ahead.
Is he going to expect the same standards from the car insurance general?
Yeah, that guy actually looks like he's already in shape. He could probably beat you up right now, Ken.
Right, yeah. But the whole thing is that everything's got, see, I drive a truck for a living. I don't think truck drivers should be 400 or 500 pounds. You can't get out of the seat. When there's an accident, they have a hard time restracting you. And, I mean, there should be standards. And there is standards, because if I don't pass my physical, I just took my physical today. I passed with flying colors. But the whole thing is that a lot of these truck drivers, whether they're in their home state or wherever, they know where to get them. They have doctors that are saying, okay, well, $200, and then you get it. That's uncalled for. That shouldn't happen.
Well, we have no standards here in talk radio. Sean Allen over there's 500 pounds, and I'm kidding him. He's not. Weird. I can squeeze in one more. This will be Kevin. Kevin and Allen, you're on WBAP.
Hey, James. Back in the 90s in Navy, the standards were upheld, early 90s. They were upheld for everybody on up through the captain on the ship that I was on, and everybody had to pass that PT test or you got put on the fat body program.
Were you there when the standards changed?
They were changing a little bit when I got out, but no, when I was in, you had twice a year, you had to meet the physical standards, or else you were put on, like I said, fat body program. So.
Well, the more I think about it, the more I am learning how absolutely wild it is that our military has less rigorous physical requirements than your local Hooters, right? They wouldn't let a 300-pound person just slip through the cracks.
The James Show Podcast.